I still remember the morning when everything in my life quietly changed, though at that time I had no idea what was coming. It was early, the sun was barely rising, and the house felt unusually silent, as if it was holding its breath. My husband Daniel had left for work, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of warm tea between my hands. I liked slow mornings like that, when the light came through the window softly and the world felt gentle. But that day my peace broke when the phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, yet something inside me told me to answer. The voice on the other end was calm but carried a strange urgency. "Mrs. Ellis, this is Riverside Hospital. We need you to come in regarding your husband." For a moment, my mind froze. The cup slipped from my fingers a little, and I felt the warmth of the tea touch my skin. My first thought was that something terrible had happened. I asked if Daniel was okay, but the nurse only said, "Please come as soon as you can. He is stable, but we need to discuss some information with you directly." Her tone felt deliberate, almost careful, and that frightened me more than if she had simply said he was hurt. I grabbed my bag, put on a sweater, and left the house without even finishing my tea. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light felt personal, every slow car in front of me felt like an obstacle placed there to increase my fear. My thoughts turned in circles. Why hadn't his family called me? Why had no one said anything? When I married Daniel 4 years ago, I knew his family kept a distance from me. They were polite but cold, always smiling in that way that hides more than it shows. His mother especially, always observing, always measuring, as if waiting for me to prove myself worthy of her son. I used to believe that with time, things would change. But now, as I drove, I wondered if their distance had been hiding something else all along. When I reached the hospital, the halls felt too bright, too white, and too quiet. A nurse guided me to a small consultation room with pale yellow walls and a round wooden table. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and something sweet, like hand lotion. She asked me to wait for the doctor. Sitting alone in that room, I clasped my hands together and tried to steady my breathing. Every sound outside, the rolling wheels of a cart, the soft beep of a machine, felt louder than normal. My heart thudded in my chest, heavy and slow. After a few minutes, the doctor walked in. He was gentle-looking with gray hair and calm eyes. He introduced himself, sat down across from me, and folded his hands as if preparing for a hard conversation. "Your husband collapsed at work this morning," he said. "He's stable now and he's resting, but there is something more you need to know." At that moment, the room became unbearably quiet. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The doctor looked at me with a softness that scared me even more. "Mrs. Ellis, according to our records, your husband has a medical condition that he should have been monitoring for years, a condition he has never treated." He paused to let the words sink in, but they only confused me. I asked him what he meant. The doctor continued, choosing each word with care. "Your husband has a genetic heart disorder. It is something that should have been disclosed to you, and something his family has known about for a long time." For a moment, my breath simply left me. I felt the air around me thicken, like the walls were slowly closing in. Daniel had never told me anything about this. Not once. In 4 years of marriage, through every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every fear and dream we exchanged, this never came up. I tried to find words, but all I managed to say was, "Are you sure?" The doctor nodded gently. "We have his long-term medical history. It was provided by a family member years ago. He was supposed to receive regular checkups. Unfortunately, he did not." I leaned back in my chair, pressing my hand to my chest, feeling the slow, heavy beat of my heart as if it were struggling to keep up with my thoughts. Genetic, family knew, not treated, hidden, the words circled around me like cold air. I kept thinking, why would he hide this from me? Why would his family keep silent? What kind of secret was this? I felt a quiet ache spreading inside me, not sharp like fear but deep, like disappointment mixed with confusion. Memories flashed through my mind. His mother's tight smile at our wedding, the way his father avoided long conversations with me, how they always insisted on planning holidays at their home instead of visiting ours. Their strange protectiveness of Daniel, their constant need to keep him close. In that small hospital room, those memories suddenly looked different. They felt like puzzle pieces I had ignored for too long. The doctor advised me to stay calm, to be there for Daniel, and to ask him about everything once he was awake. But I could not help wondering if he would even tell me the truth, or if he would try to hide it again behind gentle excuses and soft reassurances. When I finally walked into his hospital room, I saw him lying there with his eyes closed, his breathing steady, his face pale under the soft light. I stood at the doorway for a moment, watching him, feeling a strange mixture of love, sadness, and quiet anger rise in my chest. How could someone I loved so deeply carry such a heavy secret without letting me share even a corner of it? I walked to his bedside and gently touched his hand. His fingers moved slightly, like he felt my presence. I wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, I whispered to myself, "Why didn't you trust me?" The machines around him hummed softly, their steady rhythm filling the room like a slow, distant heartbeat. I stayed there, holding his hand, not knowing that this was only the beginning. The secret his family hid was much bigger than a medical condition, and the truth waiting for me was far more painful than anything the doctor had just told me. At that moment, in that quiet hospital room, I thought I was preparing to hear one difficult truth. I did not know I was standing at the edge of a story that would change my entire life. The next morning, the hospital room felt even quieter than before, as if the walls themselves were listening to my thoughts. Daniel was still asleep when I arrived, his chest rising and falling slowly, his face calmer than mine. I pulled a chair beside him and sat down, watching the soft light seep through the curtains. The silence gave me too much time to think, and my mind kept circling back to the one thing I could not shake. His family knew. They had known for years. They had watched him go through life with a dangerous condition and had never said a word. Not to him, not to me, not even when we got married. The more I thought about it, the more the silence felt like betrayal. A quiet, carefully built betrayal that lived inside our marriage without me ever noticing. Around mid-morning, the door opened slowly, and Daniel's mother stepped in. She wore a neat gray sweater, her hair pinned tightly in place, her expression controlled in the way I had always known. But that day, something in her face seemed heavier, like she was carrying a truth she had been afraid to face. She gave me a small nod, not warm but not cold either. "How is he?" she asked, her voice low. I answered honestly. "Stable. The doctor said he needs long-term monitoring." She looked at Daniel for a long moment, her eyes softening just barely. Then she said quietly, "We should talk." I followed her out into the hallway, where the hum of machines and distant footsteps filled the space. We stood near a window where the morning sun reflected off the parking lot below. She kept her hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. "You spoke to the doctor," she said. I nodded. She took a slow breath. "I'm sure you have questions." There was a long pause, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt the walls between us thin just a little. I asked the only question that mattered. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" She looked down at her hands. "Because Daniel didn't want you to know. And we respected that." Her answer stunned me, not because it was complicated, but because it was too simple, too neat. "He didn't want me to know he had a condition that could take his life?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "He didn't want to burden you. He believed that if you knew, you would look at him differently, worry about him constantly, or even reconsider the future." I felt a dull pain bloom inside my chest. I married him. Chose him. I should have been trusted with the truth. She looked up then, her eyes full of something like regret. "We thought we were protecting him, and in a strange way, protecting you too." For a moment, I saw her not as the distant mother-in-law who kept me at arm's length, but as a woman who had spent her entire life hiding fear beneath control. But the tenderness of that moment faded quickly when another question rose in my mind. "How long have you known?" She hesitated. "Since he was 14. 14, the number hit me like a cold wave. They had lived with this knowledge for most of his life. They had carried it through his school years, his college days, his adulthood, our dating, our engagement, our wedding. And still no one had whispered even a hint of the truth. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked softly. She looked away, her jaw tightening slightly. "It's not my place to say. Daniel must tell you himself." Those words felt like a door closing. I wanted answers, but she was offering only half-truths wrapped in concern. "Please," I said, "I need to understand what I'm dealing with." She shook her head gently. "You will, but he must be the one to say it." She turned and walked away slowly, her steps uncertain. I stood at the window long after she left, watching the sun brighten the cars below, feeling as if I was standing in the middle of a maze built out of secrets. When I returned to Daniel's room, the nurse was checking his vitals. Soon as she left, he stirred and opened his eyes. His gaze found mine, and I saw tiredness, not just physical exhaustion but the weight of something he had carried for too long. "You're here," he whispered. "Of course I'm here," I said, taking his hand gently. He looked at our intertwined fingers for a long moment before saying, "You talked to the doctor." I nodded. His eyes softened with guilt. "I didn't want you to worry." "I'm your wife," I said quietly. "Worrying about each other is part of love." A long silence followed. He stared up at the ceiling as if searching for the right words. Finally, he said, "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." My heart tightened. I leaned a little closer, waiting. He swallowed hard. "The condition, it runs in my family, but I'm not the only one affected." I felt my breath slow. "What do you mean?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "There's a history, a long one, and my mother. She didn't want anyone outside the family to know. She believes it's a private matter, something we should handle on our own." I tried to understand. "So your family hid it because of pride?" He shook his head. "Not pride, fear." I waited, but he didn't continue. I could feel him retreating into himself the way he always did when something was too painful to face. I didn't push him. Instead, I asked softly, "What are you afraid of?" He closed his eyes. "Losing you." The words broke something tender inside me. I squeezed his hand, hoping it would reassure him, but the ache in my chest only grew deeper. It wasn't just the condition that hurt, it was the years of secrets wrapped around it, the layers of silence that had shaped our marriage without me even knowing. For the rest of the day, I stayed by his side, listening to the gentle hum of the monitors, watching him doze in and out of sleep. Nurses came and went, adjusting tubes, checking charts, speaking softly. Every time the curtain swayed, I half expected his family to walk in with another half-truth. By evening, the sky outside had turned a soft blue-gray, with clouds drifting like slow thoughts. I stood by the window, thinking about all the moments when his family's behavior had made me feel like an outsider. The closed-door conversations, the strange pauses when I entered the room, the way they always spoke in fragments instead of full stories. Now those moments felt like clues I had missed. When I returned to Daniel's bedside, he opened his eyes again, this time with a clearer expression, as if he had made a decision. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "I'll tell you everything, no more secrets." I nodded gently, trying to smile, but inside a quiet dread curled around my heart. Because deep down, I sensed that whatever he was about to tell me would change everything. And I wasn't sure if I was ready, not yet, but I would have to be, because the truth was finally coming for us. The next morning arrived with a kind of quiet that felt almost unnatural, as if the world outside the hospital had paused just to give me space to breathe before everything changed again. I had barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying Daniel's words. "Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything." Those words repeated in my mind like a slow echo. By the time I walked into his hospital room, the soft morning light spilling over the sheets, I felt a strange mixture of dread and readiness. Daniel was awake, propped up slightly against the pillows, staring at the window as if gathering courage from the sunrise. When he looked at me, there was a heaviness in his eyes that I had never seen before, not fear exactly, but something deeper, like a man preparing to unwrap years of carefully guarded truth. I sat down beside him, gently taking his hand. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I wanted him to take his time, to choose his words without pressure. Finally, he turned toward me and took a breath that trembled just slightly. "I need you to know," he began, "that I never hid anything from you because I doubted your love or your strength. I hid it because my family raised me to believe that our problems, especially this one, should stay within the family. They taught me to think silence was the same as protection." His voice cracked a little, squeezed his hand, encouraging him silently. "The condition I have," he continued, "didn't start with me. It started with my grandfather. He died young in his early 30s. My father almost died in his 40s. He was lucky they caught it in time, but it changed him. He lived his entire life afraid that I would follow the same path." I felt a heaviness settle into my chest, a slow, deep ache. "But genetic conditions can be managed," I whispered. "You could have lived normally if you took care." He nodded sadly. "Yes, but my father didn't believe in doctors. He believed in silence, in pretending that if you don't speak about a problem, maybe it won't become real. And my mother, she learned to live in fear, always watching him, always protecting him, always hiding the truth from the world. When they found out I had inherited it, they panicked. They thought that if people knew, I'd be treated differently, pitied, questioned, or kept from doing things I loved." He closed his eyes for a moment. "They made me promise not to tell anyone, not even you. They said it was for my own good, but the truth is I was scared too. I didn't want to see fear in your eyes when you looked at me." His words were soft, careful, honest in a way that hurt. I breathed slowly, trying to process the weight of everything he had carried alone. "Why now?" I asked gently. "Why tell me now?" He looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "Because yesterday, when I collapsed, I realized that if something ever happened to me, you would be left in the dark. You would be left wondering why. You deserved the truth long before this, and I'm sorry I didn't give it to you." I felt tears gathering, but they didn't fall. Instead, I squeezed his hand again, feeling a quiet grief wash over me. "I wish you had trusted me," I whispered. "We could have carried this together." Daniel nodded slowly, guilt shadowing his face. "There's more," he said after a long pause. "Something my mother has never allowed me to talk about. Something I think she hoped you would never find out." My heart tightened. "What is it?" He hesitated, looking toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in and stop him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I had a brother." The room fell silent. I stared at him, unsure if I had heard correctly. "A brother?" He nodded, looking down at his hands. "His name was Michael. He died when he was 19. He had the same condition, only worse. My family hid his death from everyone outside the family. They didn't tell neighbors, they didn't tell friends, they even made sure nothing appeared in the local papers. They treated it like a shameful secret, something to bury." My breath caught in my throat. "But why keep something like that hidden?" He looked up, pain in his eyes. Because my mother believes that our family is cursed, that the world doesn't need to know how fragile we really are. She thinks talking about it brings misfortune, as if silence could magically protect us. His words sank into me slowly, like stones falling through water. A brother I never knew existed. A death hidden like a stain. A family living behind a curtain of secrecy for so long that telling the truth felt dangerous to them. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. "Does your mother know you're telling me this?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "No, she would never approve. In her mind, the truth only brings pain, and the more people who know, the more real the danger becomes." I leaned closer, my voice gentle but firm. "The danger became real the moment you collapsed. Keeping secrets didn't save you. It only kept me from protecting you." His eyes filled with regret, and I could see how deeply he believed he had failed both of us. He whispered, "I know, and I'm so sorry." I rested my forehead against his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin and the coldness of fear mixing inside me. I felt sorrow for him, for the boy who grew up afraid to speak about his own health, for the young man who lost a brother he was never allowed to mourn openly, for the husband who thought silence was safer than love. A soft knock interrupted the moment. The nurse stepped in to adjust some equipment, offering a kind smile before leaving again. When the door closed, Daniel turned to me with a new seriousness in his eyes. "There's one more part you need to know," he said quietly. "The reason my mother didn't want me to marry." I froze. Every sound in the room seemed to disappear. "Why?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Because she believes I won't live long, and she didn't want you to become a widow." The words hit me so sharply that I had to close my eyes. For a moment, everything inside me felt suspended: fear, love, anger, grief, all tangled together in one painful knot. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me, waiting for my reaction with a helplessness I had never seen in him before. I took a long breath, one that felt heavier than anything I had breathed in my life. "We will face this," I said softly. "But no more secrets. Not from you, not from your family, not from anyone." The relief in his expression was subtle but real. He nodded slowly. And in that quiet hospital room, I realized something important. This truth didn't break us. It changed us, yes. It hurt us, yes. But it also opened a door we had been afraid to touch. A door to the kind of honesty that real love needs to survive. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. His family had lived in fear for decades, and they would not let go of their secrets easily. And I could feel it, the storm of truth was only beginning. The day Daniel was discharged from the hospital felt heavier than I expected. The air outside was fresh, warm, and bright, yet inside me everything felt unsettled, like a quiet storm waiting to break. As I helped him into the car, his movements still slow from weakness, I realized that going home didn't mean the nightmare was over. It meant the truth had to face the world outside the hospital walls. On the drive back, Daniel looked out the window, speaking only once to say he felt tired. I told him to rest, but my own mind was far from resting. His confession, the family's secrets, the hidden brother, the years of silence, they all sat inside me like stones pressing down on my heart. When we reached home, the living room looked exactly as we had left it: quiet, warm, familiar. But something about it felt different, like the house itself now held our truth whether it wanted to or not. I helped Daniel sit on the couch, tucked a blanket around him, and brought him water. He gave me a small, grateful smile. "I need to talk to them," he whispered. I understood immediately: his family, the people who had guarded the secret for decades, the people who believed silence was protection, the people who had shaped his fear without realizing how much it hurt him. "Not today," I said gently. "Rest first." But even as I said it, I knew the conversation was inevitable. A few hours later, a soft knock sounded at the door. Daniel and I exchanged a quiet look before I stood and opened it. His mother was standing there, her hands clasped, her face pale and expectant. Behind her stood his father and sister, both looking equally uneasy. They stepped inside slowly, as if crossing an invisible boundary. His mother's eyes immediately went to Daniel. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Better," he said softly. "But we need to talk." His mother stiffened, as if bracing for a blow. His father looked down, avoiding eye contact. His sister sat quietly on the edge of the chair, her fingers twisting together nervously. Daniel took a long breath, the kind people take before saying something they should have said years ago. "I told her," he said, his voice calm but firm. His mother's eyes widened, then dimmed with a hurt she tried to hide. "Daniel, we agreed." "No," he interrupted gently but firmly. "You agreed, I obeyed, but I shouldn't have." The room filled with stillness. He continued, "I told her everything, about my condition, about how long we've known, about Michael." His mother flinched visibly, as if the name itself was a wound reopened after decades. Her voice cracked. "You had no right." "I had every right," Daniel said softly. "She's my wife, my partner. She deserves the truth. She should have been part of this from the beginning." His mother's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. We were only trying to protect you. I know, he said. But protection isn't supposed to isolate people, and it shouldn't hurt the people I love. His father finally spoke, voice low and tired. We didn't want history to repeat itself. Losing Michael, we never recovered. We thought if we stayed silent, maybe we could stop fate. I watched Daniel look at his father with a sadness that was both old and new. Silence didn't save him, Daniel whispered. And it won't save me either. His mother's face softened with pain. For the first time since I had known her, she seemed fragile, like a woman who had carried fear on her shoulders so long that she forgot she could set it down. She looked at me then, really looked at me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Not because the truth came out, but because we kept you out of it. You didn't deserve that. Her apology felt genuine, trembling, raw. I nodded gently. I just wanted to help him, I said softly. I just wanted to understand. Her eyes lowered. We were afraid that if you knew, you might leave. I felt a sharp ache at the thought. I married him knowing life isn't guaranteed. None of us are promised years, but love deserves truth. A long silence followed, filled with quiet breaths and unspoken understanding. His sister finally wiped her eyes and said softly, I always wanted you to know, but I didn't want to betray them. Daniel reached out his hand to her. You didn't betray anyone. You were stuck in the same fear we all were. Slowly, the room softened, not with sudden forgiveness but with the first fragile steps toward healing. Hours passed as we spoke, gently, carefully about Michael, about their fear, about the years of silence none of us could undo. And as the sunlight dimmed outside the windows, something inside all of us began to shift. Later that night, after they left, Daniel leaned against my shoulder as we sat quietly on the couch. Was it too much? He asked softly. I shook my head. It was necessary. He sighed. Need time? We all will, I murmured. The room felt peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. Not healed, not finished, but honest, and that was a beginning. When we finally went to bed, Daniel held my hand tightly as though afraid I might slip away now that the truth was exposed. I squeezed back gently. You don't have to hide anymore, I whispered. Not from me. He nodded, his eyes warm but tired. Thank you for staying. I wasn't going anywhere, I said softly. Not then, not now. As the lights dimmed and the night settled around us, I realized something quietly beautiful. Truth, even painful truth, can strengthen love when it's handled with gentleness. Secrets weaken relationships, but honesty spoken with care can rebuild what silence breaks. Before closing my eyes, I whispered a small thought meant for both of us. Life isn't about how long we have. It's about how deeply we care while we're here. Daniel squeezed my hand again, and I felt a calm warmth settle over us. We didn't know what the future held, medical challenges, difficult days, moments of fear. But we knew one thing now. We would face it together, with truth, with tenderness, and with the quiet strength that comes from choosing love over fear. And in that moment, lying beside the man who had finally trusted me with his deepest truth, I understood that sometimes the only way forward is through honesty, even when it breaks the silence that once felt safe. Because truth may shake a family, but it also sets the heart free.